Thanks very much. Cheers. Thank you very much for having me. No, I'm having a lot of fun at a beautiful venue, and really interesting talks so far. I think you'll agree. Right, so there's been, I was kind of debating where to go with this talk, and I saw a bunch of sort of conversations happening out on the web, claiming that the web is dead, it's over. It's done. It's been happening for a while, but there's been an uptick recently. So, you know, we'll start with the harbinger of all of this, Chris Anderson from Wired, and maybe about 2010, so 3 years ago, he published an edition of Wired that boldly claimed the web is dead, and you know, basically on the premise that they'd built an iPad app. And that Wired was now going to be iPad only 100% of the time. They didn't need the website anymore. All of the claims were soundly squashed, and I think Wired still has a website, and they still publish a print edition. So we can kind of dismiss him. There's Jaron Lanier, who's going around and talking a lot about how, you know, the web is siloed, and so we need to make it so that, well, one, there's bidirectional links that we can charge for, and we can, you know, kind of lock down the web and make it this commercial space. And I'm not so convinced. You know, I think Jeremy spoke very eloquently to the point of the open web, to the ability for people to sort of make links in and out. So I'm not going to talk about Jaron's thoughts too much. But Matthew Buttrick at the Typo conference a few weeks ago made the claim that it's now or never for the web. The web is a medium for creators, including designers, but after 20 years, the web still has no culture of design excellence. And he called for the W3C to be disbanded, and that we need to really, you know, cultivate a deep design ethic in the web, or it's just going to fail. And I found a slide from this guy, Alan Pike, who's speaking at a conference in Vancouver, where he's sort of comparing native and, well, the web and native. And he says that the web is, you know, portable, but native is suitable. You know, if you have an app, native is probably more appropriate for that sort of interaction. The web's good for fast prototyping, but native is great if you want something polished. The web's good for content, native good for utility, flexible versus high performance, enterprise grade versus consumer grade, budget versus perfection. Easy things are easy, and hard things are possible in native. I kind of agree that those things are true, but I think they're cultural. I don't think there's anything to do with the specific technology. And I would add two things to that. One, that the web is good for complex things, and native apps are good for simple things. It's getting cut off there, unfortunately, but the web is also good for remote stuff in the cloud. But native stuff is good for local. So if you've got something that you're working locally on, so that sort of helps us, you know, frame, I guess, you know, the place that the web is at compared to all the apps and everything that we've seen so much of that are sort of threatening the web's existence. But I was glad that Jeremy didn't put up this slide, because he came very close. But you know, I think to reiterate what he was saying, it's fitting that the web was invented at CERN, because right now, what we're living through, and the thing that CERN and you know, this computer, this is the first web server, and I think it's my favorite computer on Earth, because it has this machine as a server, do not power down. And that's very fitting for the web's origins. This computer precipitated a big bang of information, and it's not slowing down. You know, one of the major unsolved problems in modern physics is this question of baryogenesis. So essentially, there's the fact that we exist at all is down to the fact that there are more bits of matter than there are antimatter. And so, all of the bits in the universe haven't collided and blown up in flashes of light, and so we exist. We're not sure why that happened. There's some theories, there's some various evidence of antimatter evaporating, but it's not enough to explain this asymmetry. But there's a similar thing that happens with information, and this guy, Stuart Brand, 8 years before the web existed at all at CERN, made the claim that information wants to be free, and I think he hinted at this asymmetry that I'm pointing at, that information becomes more free over time. It doesn't become less free, and that's something that just keeps growing, and that's the nature of the web. So when we look at things like WikiLeaks, it's very difficult to keep information private, and I think we've seen this very viscerally over the past few years, and it's only getting more and more of a thing. It's true of cryptanalysis. There's the cryptography is getting harder to keep things private. A friend said on Twitter recently, "Don't put anything on the internet, any part of it, however private you might think, that you wouldn't want the world to see." Easy, right? To which it's necessary to add that putting on the internet means interacting with any electronic device that might be connected to the internet, which is all of them today. So we're kind of past the privacy thing, but I'm not going to get into the sort of Mark Zuckerberg, we're past privacy. I think there's still space for privacy in the social side of things. Just in terms of information, in terms of knowledge, that's done, and it's growing constantly. Things like Anonymous. This is Biela Coleman, who's a researcher. She's a friend who has been researching Anonymous since basically the day they started. Her focus is on this weird cultural drive to basically create everything out in the open. By all means, it's not going anywhere right now. And this tendency for information to become more open and more free applies to everything, because our tools today are made of information. So I have this friend who's making keyboards, and he builds them from his office at his home in Boston. The frame is 3D printed and laser cut. The keys he gets through connections through China and whatnot, but he orders them over the internet. They're sort of this ephemeral thing that happens. All of the designs, all the electronics. He's got a great blog that you may have seen where he's talking about not knowing how to solder together wires and just messing everything up over and over again. And over the space of 3 weeks, basically comes to building several prototypes of keyboards. And all of that is driven by this open information. He couldn't have done that 20 years ago or so. And it's really expanding beyond just the realm of the tools and the things that we use. This is Julien Genesto, who lives in Maastricht and works on. He's one of these rebellious people that Jeremy was speaking of, and he was using Nodecopter and hooked up facial recognition to it. And so, here's a drone in his probably bedroom or office that's looking at him and recognizing him. And it's a different world that we've entered where these drones are things that we control and are things that we understand and we can interact with. And I think there's something really important to be learned from that this is just, it's just some guy. Because as information becomes more free and more open, it empowers people that have less power more than it empowers people that have power. There's an asymmetry there as well. So this is an image of TextMob, and in some very real way, this is the the progenitor of Twitter. I worked with the guys who did this back in, I think it was 2004. it was for the Republican National Convention leading up to the, I guess it would have been, yeah, the election of George Bush in 2004. For the protests in New York, it was basically a way for people to share what was going on in the ground during a protest in New York through their cell phones, through SMS. And you know, at the time that this was built, it was really, really difficult to build. And then that knowledge, though, came forward, and you know, I worked on Twitter in its very early days, and this is Jack's phone at the time that we were building Twitter. So you know, like this is a by modern standards, just a dinosaur of a phone, right? Like it doesn't do anything. It kind of barely does some kind of apps. I think it has a Twitter app, these sorts of things. But it's such a primitive thing, and the way that we had to build, you know, the messaging stuff was literally this. We had a phone hooked up to a laptop, and we were sending SMSs through a phone to build these things. But the technology keeps moving forward, and we get more and more access to information and to tools to build these things. And so, you know, what we could do with a funded startup. Now, this is Frontline SMS, and for a number of years now, actually, they've been building tools to help people, you know, in Africa and various other places, build communications infrastructures where there are no communications infrastructures, where there's only, you know, very limited mobile service. And it's too bad I'm seeing that you can't see the cell phone off to the side, but there's just a little cell phone off to the side. And this is continuing. So one of the groups that's very closely related to Frontline is Ushahidi, and they have a Kickstarter that you should go support right now called Brick, that's building sort of resilient internet infrastructures for, you know, again, Africa and these sorts of things. And it's basically, you know, an internet in a box. So it's a computer with an Arduino with a whole bunch of other things that's in a, you know, really solid package that can be chucked around and taken anywhere. And the idea is to bring, you know, sensors. We have water quality sensors as part of the urban infrastructure that we just take for granted, but in these places they don't have those things. So Brick is trying to bring those sorts of things, those sorts of tools to just anyone for a very low cost. And it's just kind of moving forward constantly. And it's really, you know, it's really all the web. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit here and talk a little bit about architecture. So this is Le Corbusier. He was an architect who did a bunch of very sort of utopian thinking and building of architectural designs, and he's sitting here in front of l'unité d'habitation, which is you know, an apartment project that there were a number of them built that was modeled, you can see it in the drawings, modeled after cruise ships, you know, these gigantic self-sustaining ocean vessels that supported communities. And he really, you know, he designed these because people needed places to live, and they needed, you know, cheap places to live where things would be functional and nice and good. You know, they were very beautiful spaces when built. You know, a lot of care was put into the details and the sort of the layouts and the plans. So this is sort of one of the apartments, and they would sit sort of like Lego or Tetris pieces next to each other. So you've got, you know, a really nice living space, and then an upstairs and you know, 2 bedrooms and a nice big open space in the middle. And when you compare this to a lot of the modern stuff that we have, it's quite beautiful, these spaces. But his thinking gave rise to this sort of movement called brutalism, which is this idea of poured concrete buildings. And brutalism it's really interesting because it was this utopian movement in architecture. It was this thing where people were like, we're going to build great spaces for people to live, and it's going to be amazing, and the design is going to be great. The translation didn't quite make it, though. So with this building, this is the Arts Administration building at the University of British Columbia, where I went to school. And there's a funny story about this, because this building was actually a copy of a building was built in San Diego for their university. And you can see there's not really any curtains or anything, because the sort of inset windows were designed to shade out the light. The problem was the inset windows shade out the light in San Diego, where the sun is quite high in the sky. But in Vancouver, 10 or 15 degrees north, the sun's lower in the sky. So in the winter, this becomes an oven. And it's poured concrete, so there's not much you can do in terms of putting up a curtain or anything. And it's designed to be heated by sort of the light hitting these sorts of things, so it's cold on one side, hot on the other. And it was because they didn't carry through that thought. It was sort of, there was a bunch of design that went up front, and then it got replicated without the same amount of thought going through the next time. And we see lots of examples of this. So this is Pruitt-Go in St. Louis, which was built as a gigantic housing project on these utopian ideals, but it was hell on earth for the people that lived there, because they didn't build the community in an intentional way for the people. So I'll just play a little clip. This is from Koinetskatsi, and this is a video of its demolition. So they built and destroyed that whole complex in a very short amount of time, because it just didn't succeed at what it was meant to do. And it was because of a lack of design based on these utopian ideals. And we see this over and over again. This is in Hong Kong. So this is a guy, Michael Wolff, who takes these amazing photographs of the current sort of gigantic skyscrapers, these dehumanizing towers in Hong Kong. And they just go on and on and on. And they're very reminiscent of sort of the brutalist, just build a gigantic arc for human life, but they don't incorporate any of the sort of, the affordances for making things nice. And I'd like to make a jump here. I think that, this brutalist architecture is very admirable in its utopian goals. And I think we're seeing the same thing again. I think with the iPhone, with Foursquare, with Twitter, apologies, Josh, these are all the best things. They're utopian designs for people to engage in and interact with. But that's kind of not what we want, actually. You don't want everything to be the best thing. So when we get these sort of very limited design palettes, it's quite problematic, because we actually want something that supports the sort of communication that we're doing and the sort of interaction that we're doing. And I think the design that we see out on the web today is based really strongly on these patterns that we have, that we copy from the sort of the big 5 design sources, sort of Google, Apple, Twitter, Facebook, maybe Microsoft or something, I'm not really sure. And I think it as designers and developers, it's incumbent upon us to really think about what we're doing. So this is Dan Hill, and he gave a talk in Norway last week. It's a real shame about the sizing of the screen, but I'll read it to you. He says, "We don't make cities in order to make buildings or infrastructure." So what he's saying is that we make buildings and infrastructure in order to support cities. And cities are places where humans and people interact and live and exist and engage and create and destroy and all of these things. And there's these chaotic environments. And we don't think about the architecture and the buildings as things to create that. We should think of it as things to support that. And when we look at a city like London, it's chaotic, it's crazy. There's no design principles here. You've got the Tower of London, you've got these new buildings going up, you've got the Shard, you've got the City Hall and the Tower Bridge, and some crazy warship in the middle, and a bunch of bridges that have been torn down and built up again dozens of times over the past millennium. And it's insane, but that's okay because that's what people want. That's what people do, because inside those Chinese skyscrapers, people are creating their own spaces, and they're sort of they're shaping them to be their own thing, as much as they can. So even within this sort of few square meter box, there's an incredible amount of diversity that we see people create. And people live their whole lives in these things. And so when I see images like this one of like, oh my God, the horrors of all of the different Android devices that we need to design for, this is horrible. No, this is fantastic. This is pushing us, this is giving us different sort of ideas about how to think about the things that we're doing. It's giving us creativity, it's giving us freedom, really. It's great. When I look at sites that, I'm not sure what the business model of either This Is My Jam or Snapchat is, but I love them both. Snapchat, for those who don't know, you can send pictures that don't get saved unless someone screenshots them. And I've been using it a ton, not for weird stuff. But it's really fun because it's kind of the counterpoint to what Jeremy was saying. It's stuff that I can put out on the internet and know that it's not going to exist. And that's just a fun sort of conceptual experiment. And This Is My Jam on the other side is it's a site where you post the music that you care a lot about right now. So it's built by people who did this who did Last.fm. But they said, you know what? Recording all the music that you listen to, that's actually not great, because some days you put one song on repeat and listen to it 1,000 times, and that means that you like it right then because you needed to listen to it 1,000 times, but most of the time you wouldn't ever listen to that song. Or maybe you're just listening to like the radio, and there's a whole bunch of crap that plays that gets scrobbled into Last.fm that you don't even know what it is, you don't care. And the algorithms, these machines that watch over us and try and create spaces for us, think, oh yeah, you really like that music. And it's like, no, I heard it once, I don't care. So This Is My Jam, you upload a track and you say, this is the thing that I care about. And you do it once a week. And that's the total antithesis to like sort of virality and this whole social networking and rapid sharing and everything. And for a long time, they didn't even have an archive function. They built it now, but they didn't have one because it was just like, well, what do you care about right now? And I love these experiments. And I think we should be thinking about things like Google Glass. As dorky as it might be, the reality is it's going to be a thing. I don't know how many people have tried it, but it kind of works. It didn't like it when I said, Glass, take a photo, but when I said, Glass, take a picture, it worked. Glass, take a photo called the guy's mom, which was weird. But they'll fix those bugs, right? There's a director called Jacques Tati, who's a French director from the 50s, and he hated technology. He just despised it. And he would depict his characters like getting really upset about, the car arrives at the house and it's backfiring, and everyone's like, oh, cars, oh my God, they're so annoying, they backfire. Kind of missed the point there. Like, they'll fix that bug. And I think the same thing is true with Glass. They'll fix that bug thing. They'll just put it in our face, and it'll be great. And it's up to us to think about those interactions. That's a web browser there. It's up to us to think about those interactions. Same thing with the self-driving cars and like all of these technologies that are, this is the high end of the brick. and all of these sorts of things. But this is the complicated stuff that's not going to be complicated in 10 years. And so, think about these things. And when we talk about questioning assumptions, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that I've been working on. So I was building a walkthrough, and then I tried to sign into Instagram on the website. This was my process. I'm like, oh, maybe, I think it's that username, but different password. No, okay. So I click on Forget Password. Asks me for my email address. So give it my email address, type in a CAPTCHA. I have no idea what that says. Yeah, I got it right. I think I'm a human. And then, I go, I check my email, tells me my password, or gives me a password reset link, but doesn't tell me my username. So it sends me to type in my password here. So it knows who I'm trying to sign in as. So I've already used that one. I can't use that one. Oh, that is your password. But you're not allowed to change your password to that password. At that point, I didn't know what my username was, but I knew what my password was. Thanks, Instagram. And they didn't sign me in. And so this is a subject that I care a fair bit about because of the work that I did on OAuth. And I'm totally fed up with standards bodies and think that they're irrelevant and you guys should all just build stuff and not pay any attention to what standards bodies are doing at all, unless it's Alex Russell. But I care about this because this is one of the most basic interactions on the web, and we've messed it up so badly. It's terrible. We do a terrible job on this. So what is sign-in? Sign-in is just give me your email address, and I will prove that you own that email address. That's it, because that's all Instagram did. When they asked for my email address, they just said, what's your email address, and we'll prove that you own your email address, which I did by signing into my email account. That was the authentication process. That was the thing that was secure. Everything else was just Instagram's username and password, and I don't care about that clearly because I never sign in. So what I've done on a project that I'm working on right now is basically I ask for an email address, and I know that that's hotmail.com. I know how to use Hotmail's sort of sign-in process. So I just say sign in with Hotmail because that's a Hotmail address, and I'll get Hotmail to verify that you are who you say you are. That's it. The same thing is true with Google. The same thing is true with Facebook. And if I've never seen you before, the computer knows that it's never seen you before. We can do a lookup in the database, and we can say, oh, that's an email address we've never seen before. Sign up with Hotmail. These are simple things. They're simple interactions, and I'm kind of raising this as a way of saying, there are all these big things that we're dealing with, with the glass and messaging networks and all of these sorts of things. But there's some really simple stuff out there that we need to fix, that we need to be thinking critically about in the way that we approach building things. This is all about doing the hard work to make things simple, and as things get more complicated, we need to make sure that we're doing, as web developers, as web designers, as people creating frameworks for each other, we need to make sure that we're doing the hard work to make it simple and not just punting on these things. So this is a screenshot of the project that I'm working on now. It's called Poetica, and it's basically a copy editing interface that we've been working on for about a year. And we've tried to create something that's beautiful and engaging. The editorial process, as we see it, is a conversation, and it's a conversation grounded in mutual trust between the editor and the writer. And we wanted the interface to disappear to highlight that conversation. We want people to be able to collaborate together directly on the text without having to think about, I'm interacting with a computer that's then going to go and interact with another computer that's then going to go and interact with the person that I'm interacting with. You just want that direct interaction. So we kind of removed that, and we based it a lot on what people already do with paper. And it could be levied that we're being a bit skeuomorphic, but I think what we're doing is giving people a natural interface that really supports the work that they want to do. So just to, one of the criticisms levied against the web is that it's hard, in that original list of things, it's really hard to do things with good polish and that are performant and good on the web. It's easier to do it in native, so that's where we do it. But I'd offer that it's actually possible and great to do them on the web. So I'm a little crazy. So what we did was we re-implemented highlighting in JavaScript in the browser. And we did it because I hate those toggle things that you get on tablets. So when you're selecting, you can just keep selecting, and it just joins the selection together. So on a tablet, you just select some text, select some more text, and it just joins it together. And you can extend it, and you can select more than one thing at the same time as well, because all you're ever doing is just highlighting. And this was an incredible amount of work. It was horrible. But we think that it's great for what we're trying to do, and it's all in the browser, and it's totally possible. Like, we're tracking, I don't know how much you can see it here, but there's a bit of a curve there, and we're tracking every pixel of movement and transmitting that over the network and storing all of that so that we can basically create these expressive lines so that people feel comfortable in the text that they're creating. And I've come to think of well, I've thought a lot about streams and rivers and rivers of information. Twitter's been described in that way a lot, and a lot of the thinking that I've been doing over the past sort of 6 years has been around these sort of publish-subscribe message flows where we're sending and receiving constant bits of information. That's what we do on the web in a social space. We need to think carefully about the behaviors that we want to enable and how we think about these things, because when we build sites, we want to invite people in, especially social sites. We want to invite people in to shape the space that we've created. We want them to have a role in defining that space. And we think that the community's interactions and behaviors is more important than how we think of it. So this flow and these streams of data, you can't really contain or control a river. You can dam it, but that fundamentally alters the river and changes it and doesn't really give you the thing that you were looking for if you were trying to reason about the flow of the river. The logic of the river is expressed by the erosion. So it's the banks, it's the eddies and the landscape around the river that that is the river. It's not the flow, and it's the expression of the past and the sort of possibility for future. So we don't want to capture and quantify social activity as it flows past. What we want to do is cradle its eddies and build for our own erosion. So give people spaces that they can shape the things that we're building. We want people to be imaginative and sort of have access to the things that we're building. So building stuff on the web is hard, and building socially interactive environments, so building social sites, is even harder. I think Jeremy spoke a lot about this idea that we're sort of giving up control, and it's a long way from GeoCities to something like Twitter or Facebook, the sort of social interactions, the sort of mechanics, these sorts of things. And if we want the web to be really powerful, we're going to have to embrace the additional complexity and try and minimize that complexity and try and create ways of reasoning about that complexity. But the truth is, it's hard. There's a lot of work here, and we need to do it many, many times over. Talking about Snapchat and This Is My Jam. There are tens of thousands of experiments like those that need to happen before we understand what sociality on the web is. So I think that's an opportunity, though, because native apps aren't really good at building those sort of social interactions. Where they are, they're supported by the web. It's just a front piece and could be replaced by the web fairly easily. So it's better to think of everything as the web. kind of. And in the McLuhan sense, the web is a meta-medium. It's a medium for building mediums. It's also a meta-practice that we engage in, this building of things, being web designers and developers and all of these sorts of jobs. We're not just building, we're not just designing. It's not art or literature or music or engineering or theory. It's all of them all together, because we're creating spaces for people to engage in different sorts of acts of creations. One of my favorite people on the web is Ian Bogost. He is a brilliant game designer, and he built the best game ever. It's called Cow Clicker. It was a game on Facebook. You can't play it anymore, sadly, partially because there's no alternative runtime environment to run it in. So even if he open sourced it, you still wouldn't be able to run it. Basically, you could click on a cow every 6 hours, and it would go moo. It's pretty good. And the best part, though, the real sort of interaction hook, was that if you shared that you clicked on the cow into your timeline, your friends could click on your click, and you would both get Mooney, with which you could buy cows that look different than that one. It's brilliant. He also did these, and I'll play you a short video. So these are game poems, he calls them, built for Atari. So this is autumn. And you're meant to catch falling leaves in this pile of leaves. The beautiful trick is, though, when a leaf starts to fall, the interface blocks and you can't move the pile of leaves. So you can never catch the leaves. This is winter, and the goal is to drink your coffee slowly enough that you get to see the sunrise, but not so quickly, and keep the coffee warm, but not so quickly that it goes away before you see the sunrise. This is spring. You watch the rain, and you count the time between lightning and thunderclaps. And this is summer, where your objective is to nod off slowly by the river. And I love these so much because they really hint at this deep creativity and the sorts of things that we can create. They might not be super useful, but at least they're there, and we can sort of inject those and that playfulness and that creativity into the things that we're building, and sort of let go some of the preconceptions that we have. So again, to sort of switch back and kind of wrap up all of this stuff about the web, Jeremy, again, who kind of gave my talk without giving my talk, which was nice, talked about the power of the linking. And one of the things that's strange for me is that the ability to link and aggregate information has had this counterintuitive result compared to what I was talking about earlier, about information being open and expansive. These basically brutalist utopian spaces that we've created, Twitter and Facebook and so on, by all rights on the web, they shouldn't have worked, because there's no point in being in a space when you can link anywhere, when you can go anywhere, when there's this fluidity of existence and motion. So the unity of habitation is not necessary, but somehow we've been stuck there, and it's been more effective than any architectural experiment before. And it's scary a little bit. I put this slide in after Jeremy put it in, because I didn't realize something about this, about the Olympics. I didn't realize that Tim tweeted that. I thought that was just a display, but Tim tweeted that, and that terrifies me, because this is not for everyone. This is for, wait for it, Jack Dorsey and Rupert Murdoch sitting on their yacht together. This is scary. This is really, really scary because we don't own the communication mediums that we use to sort of engage. That's a problem. It's no small part of why I left Twitter, because it was heading in this sort of giant direction rather than the decentralized one. And it's sad, Google just shut off Google Talk integration, so it's getting worse, not better, and that scares me. I'm not really sure what that means, but I'm not hopeless. Right now, we're in a gold rush for ideas, in the sense that when the California gold rush happened, there was just gold in the streams. You just walk up and you grab some gold, and you're like, I got some gold. It was really easy, especially in the early days, and there was a lot of it. It was sort of 6 years of just show up and not get rich, but make some money. And then a long time after that, the mining processes sort of continued. Right now, we're in a gold rush for ideas. There are a lot of ideas. There are a lot of ideas that haven't been built, and they're just there. There's hundreds and thousands of ideas just waiting to be created. And so the space hasn't closed. It's not like Facebook is the last thing that will ever be created. So that gives me a lot of hope. And I think just to go back to the rivers, when we're thinking about creating spaces for erosion and for sort of the creation over time of different spaces, the web is like a river as well. And it's important to think about it in those terms. And it's important to think about the things that we build on top of the web in those terms. You want to build things that allow people to build their own interfaces, that allow people to build their own frameworks for understanding and their own sort of interaction designs and their own rivers. You want them to be able to imagine beyond your own imagination. And if you create things that confine them to your imagination, then we're going to be trapped. But the nice thing is the web isn't a river. It's a gigantic universe, and it's colliding, and there's so much friction and so much creation that's sort of yet to happen, that I think things are going to be pretty exciting. So I started with the web is dead, so clearly I have to end with long live the web. Thank you.